Hi there! I'm Sarah and welcome back to Everyday Consent. Last week we talked about methods of finding a variety of words and phrases to describe our mental, emotional, and sexual state. Today we're going to cover how to get ourselves more used to saying those words out loud to someone else. A lot of people have some difficulty saying these words aloud. Rather, there is some barrier between thinking something and saying it. Step one in breaking down these mental walls is to figure out what they are and what's causing them. In this video, we're going to explore some specific situations where I struggled with using my words and talk about what's causing the barrier in these cases. Maybe you've had some similar issues or maybe some different ones. Feel free to share some of your own experiences down in the comments. Real life scenario number one. I'm in bed with somebody and my partner has just started going down on me. He's focusing a lot on my clit, but I know from experience that I would prefer if he used broad strokes over the rest of my vulva and then came back to my clit once I was a bit more warmed up. I have a very clear picture of this in my head, but I haven't said any of it out loud to my partner yet. Why? I'm afraid he'll think he's doing something wrong and that'll make him insecure. I do like what he's doing, it's not painful or unpleasant, and I certainly don't want to discourage him. I don't want to script him too heavily and hinder his creativity. Maybe he'll do something I'm not used to and I'll end up liking it. I do like surprises. Like I said, I have come up with words to describe what I mean, but maybe use the flat of your tongue in broad strokes across the rest of my vulva feels a little clinical and detached, and I'm worried maybe he won't find that sexy. Beyond that, I'm worried that he won't find me directing him at all to be sexy, and it might even be a turnoff. And I'm just not used to saying it. I'm not used to hearing it. It's not something that I have in my head as something you say during sex. Real life scenario number two. I'm in bed with a partner and I'm very warmed up at this point. We've been touching each other a lot, and we're currently making out. My partner in this scenario has a penis, and what I really want right now is to initiate vaginal penetrative sex. Now in this case, what I'm trying to communicate is super simple, and there are a plethora of familiar colloquial phrases out there for me to choose from. So I could go for something flowery, but that's not really me. So most of what's popping into my head are things that sound like a stereotypical line from a porno. But now I'm having trouble because though the phrases I'm thinking of are pretty familiar as sexual scripts and are pretty accurate, they feel a little bit weird because they're so stereotypical. It feels a little bit artificial and not genuinely me, which doesn't make me feel sexy. Or sometimes it does feel more genuine and does make me feel sexy, but I'm worried it won't feel sexy to them. Maybe they'll think it sounds weird or over the top. Between these two scenarios, I've mentioned a lot of different concerns. 1. Fear, especially fear of my partner judging me. 2. Dissatisfaction with the words I can think of. 3. A lack of practice vocalizing my desires and a lack of examples to follow. My first concern, fear, is basically fear of being honest with my partner. I'm afraid of showing them who I am and what I'm thinking and feeling. And this is interesting because I personally am not afraid to show them who I am in other circumstances. I had no trouble telling them my opinion of the movie we saw last week. I didn't hold back when I wanted to tell stupid puns, or when I snorted when I laughed, or when I ate messily. These are all things that they might have found weird, might have even found a turn-off. But I didn't suppress them because they're just who I am, and they'll like it or they won't. So for this barrier, I just need to try thinking that way during sex, too. For the second concern, word choice, I can keep learning words that I like better, like we talked about in last week's video. But also, I just need to accept that imperfect words are better than no words. Repeat after me. Imperfect words are better than no words. Use your words, Sarah. In terms of practice and examples, we need to make sure that we practice in our own lives and work on setting examples and norms. We're going to keep talking about this, but for now let's focus on individual practice. To talk through this, let's go to another scenario from my own life. I share a lot with my friends and I talk with them pretty explicitly about sex sometimes. And earlier this year, I'd gotten into a long conversation with my friend, let's call him Steve, about one of these tongue-tied situations I'd had with a partner, let's call him Joe. I was able to tell my friend Steve about why I was frustrated and how I wish it had gone differently. And Steve suggested just telling Joe about my frustrations. Even though it was after the fact, Steve figured Joe would probably still want to hear it, especially if Joe and I were going to have sex again. And so that's what I did. We talk a lot on Instant Messenger, so I wrote out a long message to Joe, gathered my courage, and sent it. He thanked me for doing so, we got into a long conversation, and it proved very useful. Thank you, Steve. Friends are so smart. What we can learn from this is, even though we may not be able to express ourselves in the moment, later on in a lower pressure situation, we can think it through with ourselves or with a friend, and maybe that conversation can give us the courage to have a valuable discussion with our partner. So if you're up for it, your assignment this week is to try this out for yourself. Think about a sexual encounter where you had something you wanted to say but couldn't bring yourself to. Maybe for some of the reasons I mentioned earlier, or maybe for another reason. Think about what you wanted to say. Describe the situation, how it went, and how you wish it had gone differently. If you have a friend you feel comfortable talking through this with, say all this to them, or at least say it all aloud to yourself. Write down what you might want to say to your partner. If you feel comfortable actually sharing this with that partner, then go ahead and send them that message or talk with them in person. Happy consenting! See you next week! That wasn't a sex face.
Looked like it could have been.
This is the face I'm making. I don't understand why he doesn't know what I want. You think it's sexy, right? Penetrative. 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 All words are useful. Find words that you like, even if they're completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
Good. Is it good? Is it my good side? No.